What is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of the word value? When something is valuable, what does that mean? When you think of the value of an item or object, it's usually quantified by a monetary equivalent, such as a piece of jewelry being valued at X amount of dollars. In League, everything is assigned a value. Items are valued at X amount of gold, and champion's own life has value as well. When someone goes on a killing spree, they have a bounty attached to them that awards additional gold when shut down, thus being a very valuable target to kill. Value can also represent itself in more abstract ways, such as how much impact or influence it can have on a given situation. A single use of Kassadin's Riftwalk may not be a valuable ultimate for Silas to steal, but a super ultimate such as Kennan's or Malphite's is one he would enjoy very much. For the vast majority of abilities in this game, they have a set defined value. Of course, that can increase within measures, such as an ability's damage output increasing the more items with a corresponding stat you purchase, but they all fit within the confines of an expected value. There are some abilities whose value is more resilient to changes in circumstances than others. Malphite's ultimate is still a very valuable ability whether he does or doesn't build ability power. Conversely, Annie's Q's value heavily depends on how much damage it deals, therefore it's more subject to fluctuation. Such is the case for all but a select few. There exists a category of abilities in the game that don't have a fixed value, meaning they can either be worthless or possess virtually limitless impact when casted. Today we'll be discussing infinite value abilities and how they're the most powerful or useless in the game. I probably should clarify that there's a difference between an infinite value ability and an infinite scaling one. Infinite scaling is technically synonymous with infinite value for apparent reasons, but I don't consider them as such in light of them being restricted to a numerical value. For example, Nasus can deal infinite damage with Siphoning Strike, but pragmatically that's never going to happen. And there's also the matter of just because you can deal infinite damage doesn't mean you will. If you could chain CC'd and exploded before you get off 1 Q, then you can add 10 billion stacks or none for all it actually matters. Moreover, even though the ability has no ceiling on how much damage it can deal, it will always deal however much damage is displayed per cast. Therefore, it's in fact not an infinite value ability, since if it says it's going to do 1000 physical damage before calculation, it will do 1000 physical damage before calculation. No two ways about it. Abilities with infinite value are not represented in the form of a constant, they're open-ended. When you use that ability, there is no guarantee it will have the same effect each and every time because they're not directly tied to numbers in a traditional sense. While there are more than just 5, to give you a better understanding of what I mean, let's go through a few of the ones on the thumbnail, starting with Bard's Tempered Fate, the most true neutral ability in the game, or chaotic evil depending on how self-sabotaging the Bard player decides to be that day. When cast, he sends magical energy to a target location with semi-global range, and upon impact, it puts all units, friend, foe, and even towers into stasis for 2.5 seconds, exactly as if everyone simultaneously activated stopwatch. That's it. That's all the ability does. AoE Zhonya's hourglass that affects everyone. At a surface level, this ability looks rather underwhelming. It doesn't appear to change the state of a fight, it only pauses it for 2.5 seconds, but for anyone and everyone who's ever witnessed Zhonya's or stopwatch in action, you'll know this can have devastating consequences, positive and negative. When timed correctly, Tempered Fate can quite possibly be the most powerful ultimate in all of League of Legends. There are too many use cases for this. You can use Tempered Fate to behave as an uncleansable 2.5 second long range stun. You can use it to stop enemy channels, to buy time for your teammate who got caught out, to stop enemy pursuers, to set up tower dives, to be a complete dig gas. There is no limit to the amount of things it can do for or against your team. That's what makes it an infinite value ability. The impact a single use of Tempered Fate has is simply unquantifiable, but just as it can be a game changer, it can also be a game breaker, placing the onus on the Bard player to know where to use it, when to use it, who to use it on, what to use it for, and why it should be used that way. There are few abilities in the game with infinite value, and even fewer that can actively hurt the user if used incorrectly. But another example of this would be Lem's Respite, the pièce de résistance of Kindred's moveset. On activation, Kindred instantly places a circular zone around them for 4 seconds, in which all units inside the zone cannot be reduced below 10% of their maximum health under any circumstances, including executes, becoming invulnerable for the remaining duration when they reach or are at that threshold, during which they cannot be healed. Once 4 seconds pass, all targetable entities heal for a small amount. Lem's Respite can single-handedly save your entire team from certain death, with the caveat that it also preserves hostile and neutral entities. The repercussions of this kind of ability are also impossible to quantify. If the enemy team pulls off the sickest Malphite, Jarvan, Orianna, Misfortune, Zyra wombo combo, but Kindred manages to use ultimate just before that happens, they can buy time for their team to not only withstand all that damage, but situate themselves for a counterattack, granted with everyone in critical condition. Likewise, in a desperate attempt at self-preservation, the Kindred player might cast their ultimate to save their own life, even though the enemy champion is also at low HP and will therefore survive as well. While there aren't nearly as many interactions with Lem's Respite as there is with Tempered Fate, the implications are just as vast and can radically swing the outcome of a team fight in either side's favor. One last ability I want to go over is Zillion's Chrono Shift, which only affects one person at a time but still bears a distinct property of being infinite value. Chrono Shift imbues a target allied champion or Zillion himself for 5 seconds. If they die during that time, they enter stasis for 3 seconds before respawning with some health. Now I know what you're gonna say, the healing is finite, it's not like they can respawn with a billion HP, but that's not the infinite value part of Chrono Shift. The part is that Chrono Shift gives any one person on his team time, no pun intended. Depending on who he ults, where, and when, that can make all the difference between your team winning or losing a fight. Yes, it can only affect one person, and that one person respawns with a predetermined amount of health, but while the rune is active, it changes the behavior of that teammate and enemies who want that teammate dead. The enemy Zed may think twice about diving in on your backline if you have a Zillion standing right next to them ready to press R. Vice versa, your Jarvan might be more gung-ho about diving headfirst into the enemy team if you tag him with Chrono Shift and Time Bomb beforehand. It acts as both an enabler and a deterrent. A counter-argument to this is that the enemy team can simply wait out the 5 seconds for the revive passive to wear off, but more often than not, that may be more beneficial for Zillion's teammate as it gives the imbued person free reign to do whatever they damn well please. The Vayne or Kaisa or whoever isn't gonna just sit around while you time out Chrono Shift. They're gonna attack you like the kid who brags about how his dad can beat up your dad. Whether they kill the person Zillion ults or not, it gives them time. You can also just do a whole lot of nothing. Obviously, there are no potential negative outcomes to using Chrono Shift, but the list of positive outcomes is too long to track. If Zillion's in the game, every team fight is basically a 6v5 since you have to kill whoever he ults twice over, especially in the late game where he tends to have enough ability power to res the AD carry back to basically full. I should mention that even though the ones I talked about just now were all ultimates, there are infinite value basic abilities, one of the most iconic examples being Yasuo's infamous Wind Wall, letting him block a virtually limitless number of projectiles and the effects that come with them. To a lesser extent, Jax's Counter-Strike is also considered an infinite value ability if he's staring down a team of all auto attackers. Morgana's Black Shield can pass as infinite value too if the shield holds. Generally, only utility or buffs are infinite value. Damaging abilities tend not to be, given there's only so much damage they can do and only to so many targets. Although for the case of maybe Fiora's Riposte or Pantheon's Aegis Assault, both are damaging abilities but have an infinite value component to them. With those examples, by now you should have a good understanding of what differentiates an ability with infinite value from one with finite value. Now comes the next part. Why are they so good if some of them have a chance to backfire or do nothing at all? Infinite value abilities are good because their value fluctuates. While there is a potential downside to using some of them, the usefulness isn't directly correlated to the champion's current strength. In other words, it doesn't matter if Bard, Kindred, Taric, Renata, what have you are 10-0 or 0-10. That ability can pull off game-winning plays or seal your fate all the same. Tempered Fate has absolutely zero scaling properties attached to it, but that means it retains its practical benefits and drawbacks at all points of a match. You can have a Taric with room temperature IQ, but they can still pull off a clutch Cosmic Radiance by sheer chance. Sometimes it may even be beneficial for the enemy team to have an advantage for something like Renata's Hostile Takeover. In a roundabout way, these abilities, which are naturally thought of as inconsistent due to the lack of a fixed result, can be seen as the most consistent abilities in the game as they don't depend on anything. They may not get more useful if your team is ahead, but that also means their usefulness doesn't go away if your team is behind, and you typically can't respond to any of them. That is, the only thing you can do is wait out and or dodge the ability. If Yasuo throws down a wind wall, there's nothing the enemy team can do about it besides reposition or wait. But sometimes they can't do the former, such as if he blocks off an entry point, thus forcing the enemy carries to move past the wall and uncomfortably close to him. Infinite value abilities are also direct counters to a huge number of conventional attacks. As mentioned with Jax's Counter-Strike and by extension Neela's version, given that he dodges all basic attacks and the effects that come with them, Jax is a hard counter to auto attackers. Zillion and Kindred are natural counters to burst damage. The very presence of these champions and their abilities alters the way a game is played, requiring the opposing team to rethink their approach and granting additional options for the allied team. A greater display of this concept was shown through Yuumi prior to her rework, who didn't necessarily offer infinite value, but the idea of super buffing a single champion opened a Pandora's box of what-ifs. When balancing a champion, Riot tends to do so in isolation. Given that you can't depend on having a Lulu on your team every game, they balance Kog'Maw to still output a tremendous amount of damage regardless of if she's tagging along for the ride. And if a champion works a little too harmoniously with another, such as Lucian and Nami a few months ago, they might nerf a specific interaction that's being exploited, but otherwise they consider no one else but the champion's own power budget. Yuumi threw a wrench into all of that by acting as a proverbial and literal performance-enhancing drug, causing many champions who otherwise were perfectly fine on their own to require significant adjustments purely because they would be indomitable when accompanied by her. Owing to to why her very existence is a problem in this game and always will be. She is, or at least was, a walking infinite value ability. Conveniently, that segues into the final part of the video. Infinite value abilities are issued incredibly sparingly, and on the off chance they do get brought in, heavy restrictions have to be added to ensure they don't compromise agency. Going back to Vars' Tempered Fate, while it has semi-global range, it's very easy to dodge if thrown at max distance, as it takes longer to activate when thrown from afar. Kindra's ultimate forces a Wild West duel scenario where whichever party is faster on the draw after ultimate ends is the winner. Cosmic Radiance can make your entire team invincible for 2.5 seconds, but only after a 2.5 second delay, giving the enemy team a chance to wipe them out in that time frame. If you make an infinite value ability too accessible or lenient, that automatically makes a champion overpowered. Case in point, Akshan. Shortly after being released, players were vocally protesting against the passive on Going Rogue, which allows him to revive fallen teammates if he scores a takedown on the enemy champion who dispatched those teammates. The kicker was that all he had to do to proc this passive was to inflict damage on the scoundrel, and he could potentially revive everyone on his team, even if he was dead. What would happen is that during the late game, a massive teamfight would break out and your ADC or someone else would kill the Akshan who got caught out. Then both sides would accrue heavy casualties like a 3-for-3. But the last one standing on the enemy team would kill the ADC, and despite being the idiot who got caught out, Akshan would win his team the fight because a 4-for-4 is now a 4-for-1. The respawned enemy team would then have free reign over all objectives or may just push to end the game if death timers are long enough. Naturally, they made it so he had to be alive for this to take effect, but that's what happens when you make an infinite value ability too easy to pull off. Oftentimes they add a ludicrous cooldown to these kinds of effects. Kael's Divine Judgment has a cooldown of over 2.5 minutes at rank 1 because on-demand invulnerability would be completely broken if it was any more spammable. Same goes for Taric, whose ultimate has a full-on 3-minute cooldown rank 1. Even basic abilities have long cooldowns. Yasuo's Wind Wall is a staggering 30 seconds, Pantheon's E is 22, and Fior's W is 24. There are exceptions, such as Counter-Strike being only 14, but in fairness, Jax only blocks auto attacks compared to others who cover many more things. It's also hard to think of a lot of interactions with infinite value that aren't redundant. Realistically, there are only so many ways you can stop death, and they already covered most of them. There are abilities that block projectiles like Braum, Yasuo, and Samira, abilities that block auto attacks like Jax, Shen, and Neela, not a whole lot of options left. It bears repeating that you can't really make a damaging ability infinite value since there's a limit on how much health every champion has, and if you make an ability that can theoretically do infinite damage, you know for a fact players will complain about it until the end of time. That's why almost every infinite value ability is tied to something other than damage. It's easier to balance out that way. I do wish there were more abilities like this though. Not saying every champion should have a free pass back into the game even if they fall behind, but giving more open-ended skills make those champions more exciting to play with. I think we can all agree that nothing makes you poggers harder than the sickest Tempered Fate or when your Kindred Q-Flash Gale Force ults to save your life. Gives you a bit of faith in humanity. Until it takes it away from you when the same Bard or Kindred griefs you hard the next time. Such is life though, am I right? Anyways, that's gonna be it for today. Let me know your thoughts on infinite value abilities in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video though, it would be awesome if you left a like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at VarsVerum, join my Discord server, and check out my other ability discussions if you haven't yet. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon in the next one. Take care.